The nation has been filled with talk and just kind of reactions across from the fact that the United States actually enforced a death penalty an Iranian official. And this is an interesting story to share with you because there's so many facets to it, and I realized planning today's show that I could pretty much talk about this story the whole time, like the whole 45 minutes of this show, 50 minutes. But I really can't. But I want to hit some high points of the story. Number one, you likely know that the gentleman who was killed by American forces, Soleimani, is an Iranian official. He's actually a general in the Iranian military, General Qasem Soleimani. I want to tell you just a little bit about him and a little bit about Iran in just a moment. But first, I want to start with this. There are people in Washington, I'm talking members of the Senate, members of the U.S. House, who are radically upset, deeply offended that President Trump engaged in this order of the killing of Soleimani, killed in Baghdad, actually, by a drone, but the killing of him without the permission of Congress ahead of time. So there are many places I can go with this, but I want to start by just pointing out that the former Jeh Johnson, Jeh Johnson from the Obama administration, and he weighed in an interview. This did not make the left happy. I want to ask Matt the Wonderful back in Dallas to play this clip from Jeh Johnson being interviewed talking about whether or not President Trump was within his authority ordering the killing of this Iranian official. Do we have Jeh Johnson?
If you believe everything that our government is saying about General Soleimani, he was a lawful military objective. And the president, under his constitutional authority as commander-in-chief, had ample domestic legal authority to take him out without an additional congressional authorization. Whether he was a terrorist or a general in a military force that was engaged in armed attacks against our people, he was a lawful military objective.
Okay, this is probably such a sad thing for leftists in Washington to watch, because this is Jeh Johnson, Obama official, basically saying, of course, President Trump had the right to take out this guy. But I want to talk through some of the various aspects of this, starting with who the country of Iran is, what Iran is. The Iranian official who was killed by American forces or by this drone over the weekend is representing a country, the country of Iran, which has, from the founding of the current, current Islamic supremacist country, after the revolution, 1979, and Iran became the Iranian Revolutionary. They overthrew the Shah and they put in place the Iranian government we now have, which is just a Islamic terror machine posing as a country. Iran is, number one, the largest terror exporting country in the world. Number two, in Iran, the very constitution itself says the country is dedicated to following the commands of the Quran, to force the Islamization of the world. These what I'm saying are not the exact words, but this is the gist of what the Constitution of Iran says. The purpose of the country, its very existence, its purpose is to push Islamization, to force Islam onto the world. Iran does not fund all sorts of terror groups around the world because they chose to, based on some policy that their government passed last year. It is in the founding purpose of the country. Like America has a founding purpose in our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, the idea that we are a country based on individual liberty and the right of each individual to live in freedom and to live in this country with a government that protects your rights. That's the idea of America. The idea of Iran is to impose Islam on the world. It's in their constitution. They fund foreign terror groups spreading Islam via terror because that's what their constitution says they have to do. Part of what happened under the Obama years and before and after him, but the Obama years, was this mentality that somehow America could continue to deal with Iran as though they were rational. This is what gave President Obama, or the thinking behind his willingness to create the Iranian nuclear deal with Iran, to negotiate with the mullahs and the crazies from Iran and come up with the Iranian nuclear deal. And somehow, because we sat down with these people and explained to them, we really don't want them to have nuclear weapons, and we really are going to try to help them many, many ways if they'll just not develop nuclear weapons. We, America, and the other countries that negotiate along with America, with the Iranians, we treated the Iranian government as though that is what they really meant to say. It was like a big pretend. The Obama administration, whatever you believe President Obama's personal religion to be, the Obama administration treated Iran from the start as though they could be dealt with as you would some nation rooted in rationality, rooted in kind of the common international understanding that countries mostly in the world have, which is countries recognize the legitimacy of other countries and the right in other countries of people to live under their sovereign government. This notion of respecting other countries, having a sovereign right to create their own country, to run their own country based on their values, this is a widely shared view within the international community. Not so in Iran, and frankly, not so within some other Islamic majority countries. So we started in Iran this idea that we're going to have the Iranian deal and everything's going to be fine. Don't worry. We're going to, they promised not to create nuclear weapons. And so we're going to continue and we're going to send money to them. As we all know, billions, B as in boy, billions of dollars sent over to Iran on pallets of cash at night by the Obama administration. And we assumed, or we tried to say to the world, don't worry, they're not going to use this to fund terror. You have to get this point about Iran. They will always fund terror until the Islamic regime is overthrown. They will, because it's what their constitution says they must do. There is no intermediary way. There is no unique way that we can deal with Iran as a logical nation, given the constitution they have. Iran's constitution, by the way, is available on my website, americacanwetalk.org. On our homepage of our website, under shows, drop down list of links. You can go to the links to all the stories I'm going to read you today. But getting this fundamental point about Iran, getting this notion that until this regime is overthrown, this regime born out of, created by this constitution in 1979, they will always fund terror. They will always be a threat to us. We cannot treat them like a rational country. Once you get that concept, you think differently about how it is we go about dealing with Iranian terrorists, such as the gentleman who's no longer with us, Qasem Soleimani. So understanding that the leftists in this country, including many people in Washington who fancy themselves elites, the leftists in this country have been saying, that President Trump might have provoked a war here. We might be headed toward dangerous times because President Trump took out a senior Iranian official, a senior leader. He was in fact, he's the former Quds Force. He led the Quds Force, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Understanding this guy was not a small player. He was a major, major player. He has been one of the orchestrators behind the scenes in Iran of planting IEDs that have maimed and killed hundreds and hundreds of Americans, as well as people from other countries. The guy he wasn't just your average Joe military guy. He's a leader. He's a strategist. He's an Iranian hater, meaning he embraces the Islamic Iranian constitution that is determined to take out, to kill people who oppose the Iranian regime, to participate in the ongoing Islamization of the world. That's who this guy was. So we have that. Number one, Iran will never stop. They'll never, ever stop until they understand that they're meeting brute force. The fact that we killed this guy, so Iran has, of course, reacted with outrage, and they're threatening all sorts of force. And they're going to do bad things to America. really, in some ways, nothing has changed. The Iranians are always looking for a way to dominate America and Western cultures and even other Islamic countries around them, Iran being Shia. They're Shia Muslims. They certainly don't like the Sunni Muslims, and they don't like anybody else, really. And so they're always going to be about that kind of killing. But the argument of the leftists in Washington that President Trump launched this off with no plan in mind, this is what the left always does when they don't have a good answer to the reality that a president on the conservative side, a Republican, has done something really strong and really good. Now, to be clear, President Trump took out, as you heard Jay Johnson say a moment ago, President Trump took out a guy who was a military leader. He's a legitimate target of American forces, as was Osama bin Laden. And if you think back to the time when President Obama was president, he was willing to use American forces to take out and kill Osama bin Laden. You did not hear the same this echo of chorus in Washington, this left-wing chorus saying, oh my gosh, Obama's out of control. How could he do this? This is terrible. Obama took out Osama bin Laden because he was a bad actor and a threat to America and a leader in the forces of Islam against America, as was this guy. Which leads me to one story I want to mention in particular about this story. So the great senator from the great state of Texas, my home state, Senator Ted Cruz, has introduced a Senate resolution. And I got to tell you, I love this. I love it because it's strategic. And I love it because it's forceful. It is showing America as leader. So Senator Cruz has introduced a resolution in the Senate, and it is worded, it's taken the wording of a resolution that passed in the Senate 100-0 to express support when President Obama took out Osama bin Laden. And Senator Cruz is saying, let's do the same thing here, and praise President Trump for taking out this Iranian terrorist leader, Qasem Soleimani. So Senator Cruz has paralleled the language of what the Senate just jumped on board to sign when the Obama administration took out Osama bin Laden. So Senator Cruz is saying, hey, well, let's do the same thing here. Same kind of thing. We got these crazy Islamic terrorists that want to hurt us. We got a president standing up. So you have Senator Cruz has come up with this resolution. What's kind of funny about it is it's putting the Democrats into a bit of a box and a bit of a squeeze, because actually most Americans do not want to have our country terrorized by Islamic terrorists of any kind. Shia, Sunni, Wahhabi, Americans do not want to see Islamic terror in this country. Americans want to see our country standing up and fighting against Islamic terror. So Senator Cruz is saying, hey, Democrats, Republicans, we're all on board for this, right? All of us want to have this, this guy taken out. Of course we do. Why wouldn't we? And here you have it. So he's got this resolution going, and it's too early to say what the Senate's going to do with it. But he has ended up in a bit of a Twitter battle, a back and forth tweet battle with a member of the U.S. House, Ilhan Omar. Now, we talk about her a lot of times in the show, Ilhan Omar. She's a Democrat member of the U.S. House representing a small area in Minneapolis, in the state of Minnesota. And she is a Somalian refugee. And she's not, by the way, I should be clear, Iran is a Shia Muslim country, as is Iraq. But she is from Somalia. Somalia is like 99% or something like that, Sunni. So they are not Shia Muslims, but Ilhan Omar, has been, of course, very critical of President Trump agreeing and executing the order to take out this enormously horrific terrorist whose conduct has caused the death and maiming of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Americans. Ilhan Omar was against this, though, against President Trump killing him. So I wanted to have a few little tweets for your pleasure. One was Ilhan Omar was criticizing Senator Ted Cruz for wanting to have a resolution saying, yeah, we're calling in this. We want to praise this guy. In fact, I'll tell you what Senator Cruz had to say was a really great point he made in one of his tweets. This is Senator Cruz saying, according to the Obama Department of Defense, Qasem Soleimani, the guy that Trump just took out, Qasem Soleimani was a terrorist directly responsible for the murder of over 500 U.S. servicemen and women. Why, this is still Ted Cruz's tweet, why are congressional Democrats outraged that he's finally dead? He's pointing out, hey, even Obama's Defense Department recognized this guy was a vicious, murderous terrorist. So Cruz is saying, you know, of course this is what he is, and Obama's Defense Department admitted it, and yet you somehow have Democrats in Washington complaining, whining, moaning, and hand-wringing over the idea we finally took out this bad guy. And so Ilhan Omar had tweeted, so what if Trump wants war, knows this leads to war, and needs a distraction? Real question is, will those with congressional authority step in and stop him? I know I will. So she's complaining. A member of the United States Congress is complaining that the president used his rightful presidential authority to kill an Islamic terrorist, an Iranian Islamic terrorist, who has been, according to her, to Obama, has been the cause of, brought about the death of over 500 U.S. servicemen and women. So you have to ask yourself, is Ilhan Omar, whose team is she playing for? Now, she's trying to say, I'm not really against killing terrorists. Oh, no, I'm just worried about President Trump. I'm not too sure about him. But, you know, in fact, Ilhan Omar went on to say, we're outraged the president would assassinate a foreign official. She's giving dignity to the country of Iran that counts as its a foreign official, a murderous terrorist. And she's saying the reason that you can't go killing this Qasem Soleimani is because he's an Iranian foreign official. Duh, yes, he is. Let me finish her tweet. We are outraged that the president would assassinate a foreign official, possibly setting off another war without congressional authorization, and has zero plan to deal with the consequences. So, I mean, I could go on reading this Twitter exchange, but understand, Ilhan Omar is so sympathetic to Islam, is so dedicated first and foremost in her head to Islam, that she's outraged that the president would use our military forces to take out a guy who has killed them responsible for the death of at least 500 U.S. military men and women. This is what she's bothered by, that he dared to do this, that he actually dared to do the taking out this guy. You know, a couple other points. I think this is a really, really important time. Very proud of Senator Cruz for putting it out there, and let the Democrats say, because these same Democrats, you know, had nothing but praise for President Obama when he took out Osama bin Laden. And the idea, if the Democrats are trying to argue, and maybe this is what they're trying to argue, that, hey, you know, who's to say this guy's a bad guy? You know, he's just an Iranian official. But it goes back to the point I was making at the start. When you pay attention to the issue of who and what Iran is, you have to understand the Iranian government itself is committed to jihad. The Constitution of Iran commits the country to engage in jihad. Iran has been at war with America, with Israel, with Western civilization since the very moment that Constitution went into effect. So Ilhan Omar either knows this and is kind of on their side and are sympathetic, or doesn't know it, so she can't figure out why would the president go after this guy. Either way, this is a president actually doing and acting in a way which is the only way Islamic terrorists, the only thing Islamic terrorists ever have in mind is the idea that the terrorists have in mind the idea they're going to force Islam on the world. Iran has jihad woven into its constitution, and the idea that President Trump would take out a major actor, a major killer of American forces, offends the left. This is truly amazing. One little point about this whole situation. You may have been reading that. So you realize this attack on this Iranian official actually happened in Baghdad. And so there was a big story going around that the American action had so outraged the Iraqi government, now I'm on to Iraq now, that the American action had so outraged the Iraqi government that the Iraqi parliament passed a resolution saying all American forces had to leave Iraq. That's what the headline was. But let me explain something that is just, it's very misleading headline. All those headlines you read, let me explain a couple of things that really, really matter about this. Number, because I know a lot of Americans are thinking, we Americans, we shed American blood in Iraq. We worked in Iraq to help free them from Saddam Hussein, to bring some semblance of order to the country, you know, with the nation building, which I'm not a fan of, but I'm making the point that in Iraq, we shed American blood to help build up a supposedly better nation. And then you have, in Iraq, you have the parliament of Iraq saying that they're passing a resolution asking American troops to leave. A couple of things to understand about that. Number one, the resolution actually asked for all foreign troops to leave. So it wasn't just American, which is a very big difference. But number two, and more important, understand that the Iraqi parliament did pass this resolution, but they passed it with they barely had a quorum, meaning so few members of the Iraqi parliament were willing to show up this day to vote on this resolution because they're just afraid of the Iranians as everybody else. And so in this Iraqi thing, of the 329 lawmakers making up the Iraqi parliament, 329, only 173 showed up to vote for it. So, I mean, that's a quorum and their rules. I can make the rules about quorum, but that was the quorum. Really to say, this is not the will necessarily of the whole Iraqi government, but the people who dared to show up did say that. Also, you have to understand nearly all of those who supported this, the Iraqi, the Kurd and Sunni legislators, you got to understand this piece too, because within Islam, there's endless tribalism within the religion of Islam. So the Sunni members of the parliament didn't even show up for the vote. Did show up were mostly Shia, the same faction of Islam as is the guy who was killed. And so understand, again, this is the Shia Muslims in Iraq, members of parliament, complaining about how the Shia murderous bad guy was finally put out. The Kurd, K-U-R-D, Kurd members and the Shiite Sunni members of the Iraqi parliament did not show up. I think, the end of the story on this, we could do so much more detail on this. It's a story to watch. I'm probably going to have one or more Middle East experts on the next couple of weeks talking about this situation. But I do want to stress that this panic in Washington, this alleged concern that Trump might really mean something terrible and bad, and he might be really, really harming us. What President Trump did was send a message to the crazy Islamic jihadist terrorists that constitute the government of Iran that we're not going to keep up. We're not going to keep putting up with. We're not going to continue to tolerate your terrorist actions. This is America finally recognizing, and the broader, I guess I do have one last big point I want to make before we get off this topic, and that is this. In this particular case, America's forces took out Qasem Soleimani. That's good. I mean, bad guy, good riddance, glad he's gone. But the larger thing that happened was in the Middle East, filled with Iranians who fund all sorts of terrorist groups, the Hezbollah, and just we've been through all those groups 100 times in this show. We list them all, where they're from. Most of the Islamic terror groups, many of them in the Middle East, are funded by Iran. They are acting as proxies for the country of Iran in all that they are doing. What President Trump succeeded in doing with his one action was letting those people know that you might think you're safe tooling around the Middle East and engaging in terrorism and attacking innocent people, but you better start worrying about what's coming out of the sky. You better start worrying, because America is not going to put up with this anymore. The only thing people driven by the jihadist determination to spread Islam by force, to engage in violence for the purpose of spreading Islam, the only thing they understand is brute force. While many of them are willing to engage in suicide attacks, they're willing to blow themselves up, not everybody out there as a tough guy fighter on behalf of the jihadist Iranian regime really wants to have his life ended like Qasem Soleimani. There is a great benefit to America to have more of the people who've embraced this Islamic jihadist mentality to think, I don't want to end up like him. I see America is going to fight back. I want to live. I would like to have a life. And I can understand President Trump is president and he is going to do this. And we had better be on our guard. I was going to run through, before I wrapped up on this topic, a bunch of clips. I have a bunch of clips from various, I don't have them all ready for today, but I read a bunch and listened to a bunch this morning, a bunch of clips from different people who are actually, Elizabeth Warren being one good example. Elizabeth Warren actually calling into question whether or not President Trump's timing of this killing of this Soleimani guy was really all designed to distract attention from the impeachment. Okay. In addition to the fact that she is a radical leftist, she's just as socialist as Bernie Sanders, and that she's a perpetual liar, for her to say in a speech that maybe President Trump went after this guy who's killed over 500, according to Obama, over 500 U.S. military men and women, for her to say in a speech, maybe Trump did this just to distract attention from the impeachment, is so flaming out of touch, that she's almost proven herself not mentally stable. That is a crazy thing for her to say. America would like nothing more than to get out of the Middle East, to leave the Islamic world to themselves. America is never going to try to solve, the problem of all Islamic terror. They're never going to try to solve the problems between the Sunnis and the Shias and the Wahhabis and Kurds and everybody else. America can't do that. But America is going to send the message to these people, such as Qasem Soleimani, that and people who want to engage in terrorism like he does. They're going to send the message, we are going to fight. The idea that Elizabeth Warren actually thought it constituted rational assessment of anything, she's an embarrassment as a candidate for president. She's an embarrassment. And the very last point in this topic, because I really have a couple of topics I want to hit, but the very last topic on this is, Colin Kaepernick, who, made his fame by wouldn't stand up at NFL games during the national anthem, wouldn't salute the flag, his whole protest, and he's gone down, and, he doesn't have a place to play, and he, staged some big attempt to come back, and, the teams in the NFL were not interested in him. But I want to just tell you what his take was, what he actually tweeted and said about America taking out an Islamic terrorist who happened to have an official position in the jihadist government of the country of Iran, who is responsible for the deaths of at least 500 U.S. military men and women, plenty of whom I'm going to guess were they were black, brown, white. They're all different ethnicities, races, national origins, all different skin color. But Colin Kaepernick, fixated on skin color, actually tweeted his response to what President Trump did was a tweet that said, there is nothing new about American terrorist attacks against Black and brown people for the expansion of American imperialism. He went on, America has always sanctioned and besieged Black and brown bodies, both at home and abroad. American militarism is the weapon wielded by American imperialism to enforce its policing and plundering of the non-white world. People, the fact that there's a guy who actually thinks that's true is kind of a sad enough commentary on America. Sad enough, he actually thinks that is a rational thing to say. He sees the world in such black and white terms that he can't factor in, he can't fathom that there is an ideology such as Islam that is determined to destroy everything in its wake, that the country of Iran is committed to jihad in its constitution. He can't fathom that. He assumes everything America does must somehow be tied to this racism he tries to claim exists rampantly in America, that racism drove our willingness to take out this guy, Qasem Soleimani, who himself had killed hundreds of Black and white and brown Americans. I mean, he's obviously not a serious commentator. He's not a serious thinker. He's just just end of the day, he lives and moves and determined more than anything else in his life to be sure to be putting down America and claiming America's imperialist. But seriously, in this particular note, my final parting shot on this topic and on him is how in the world Nike, an American company that depends on American and international buyers, stands by him as their spokesman when he makes such irrationally irresponsible, outrageous, false statements about the brave American military comprised of all races, religions, ethnicities, and skin colors, the American military acting to defend American interests, and he sees it as a perpetuation of American imperialism. The guy, he's an embarrassment and he doesn't know it, but worse, it appears the people at Nike don't know it either. I'm going to hit two other topics. I can see my time raced by today, like it always does, but it's such a big story, and there are really many more pieces we could have shared, but I want to have all of us really paying attention to this story, understanding who this guy was, understanding how irrational the Democrat Party's opposition to President Trump's action really is.